Pixie, and I'm on doing another video. Let's get manoeuvres out the way. It's alright when you're in a straight line. You want to make sure I'm safe, don't you? So, possibly some esoteric stuff today, I think. Worth talking about. So I was looking at some stuff to do with mirrors, actually. Mirrors are quite interesting. That you can use them as tools. And it was stuff that I did when I was young as well. When I was a teenager, I was in my parents' room, and the light was out, and it actually felt like something was already in that room anyway. You know, it's like you have that fear of the dark, and sometimes it's quite natural because what you're encountering is an entity in that darkness, and you just don't have any understanding of it in your body. So you have feeling something in a room but not being able to see it generates a slight fear. You know, it says that prickle up your spine, and if it touches you and moves around by you, you can feel it as well. I mean, I've had an interesting experience yesterday. I'll tell you about in a bit. So yeah, if you use a mirror in a darkened room and you stare at yourself, then you can manifest what you want. Because you're using yourself as a portal, but you're reflecting it back in on yourself. You're like hacking the universe in a way, in a kind of sort of strange way. You're using that as a kind of quantum gate that's reflecting what's going on in the inside of you. So if you concentrate and project what you want to manifest, as most people look at that and they want to see their past lives and things. And what happens is you stare. You might squint your eyes slightly as well, that helps. And what happens is your face kind of fades out and goes dark. It doesn't take long to do this, because it's what you do when you go to sleep, I guess. It goes dark when you close your eyes, and but you can sense the contrast and shadows. So what happens is it goes dark, and if you stare and just relax your eyes and concentrate, you can see sort of past life self manifest, or maybe it's a entity that's attached to you, so you may see some different things. But once you've kind of trained your mind for that, you can then start using it as a tool to search. So a bit like when people do scrying with crystals and other things. So once you've got the basics out of the way, then you can move on to a bit more adept stuff and build on that. So the other thing as well, I sometimes do a bit of channeling, and it's that there's a sea of consciousness that we're a part of, and so I'm dipping into that. And there are things in that consciousness that reflectively are what all people think, like, you know, peace and love and all these other things. And some of it's like energy. So when I started making these reptilian noises and stuff like that, it was it's almost like a psychic massage. I'm feeling relaxed because I kind of let out some tension. Yeah, so it's this kind of energy, so it's more primal. You know, it's a bit like, I don't know, if somebody started shouting, that it would feel, after a while, it would feel like a lot of energy. They'd probably feel better after a while, because the amount of energy they'd release seems to push out all the blockages and things like that. So that's really what's going on there. And with the consciousness, it's a mixture of mine and what I can really tap into. But it's in that field of consciousness, and that sea of consciousness. And if more people project with channeling at this level, they create this kind of buffer, so there's this zone where people tune into similar thoughts, waves. So it's probably in this kind of like, almost like you could say a telepathic wavelength. You'll pick up information. But it's not really amazing. It's something we can all do. But I think to go beyond that is probably more difficult. So it's like, I don't know, it's like the atmosphere really. You can, see it's there, but you want to go beyond, you want to go to the stars. And so with a more deeper consciousness, what you need to do is you need to focus on where you want to go. So you probably need to go outside to actually see the stars, and then you want to have that image recorded in your mind, and then go back to that image when you go to meditate, and then project on travelling into that area, because otherwise you'll just be tuning into into this loop, because this energy, if it's like what can I sense, what can I feel, and then if you're feeling energies and you're feeling sort of a wavelength that most humans use, you're just tuning into like a radio station, so you're just picking up stuff from the radio station, and you want to draw into new information, so you can project beyond that. There's some other things as well about the mirrors. If you have a mirror and you want to use it as some kind of tool, you can also use it as a kind of a window or a portal. So what you need to do with that is with your sort of like third eye. So when you you say you looked at the mirror for a while, then you close your eyes and start meditating. And then what you do is when you come out your body, you see that mirror as a doorway into somewhere else. So a bit like the Matrix, Neo got up and started poking with the mirror. He knew something was a bit odd about it. But what you're going to do is this mirror will become a doorway somewhere else. So when you journey through that mirror, you create a kind of a quantum attachment to it. So whereby you go into a different realm or different area, that becomes a doorway. And when you come back, if you go back in your body, you still see it open. It still remains as a doorway. So there's a certain energy you could draw upon it. So it could be you focus on places like to go, but be aware you also, as a doorway being open, you also leave it open to other entities. And also be aware of other things on YouTube. I was watching this chap going on about Solomon's magic, and he did an incantation. Put a flower on himself. No, he said all the spirits above and below the earth and all these sorts of things. But what happened was he did this thing in this room with all my other sort of magical things in there, because I've got mirrors that that view back on themselves, so it becomes an endless doorway to different dimensions. So anyway, he done that. He said to summon all of them up, and then what happened is I got about 5 or 6 things in the room. You just felt like it's like the light was slightly distorted, but you couldn't see with your eyes. It's like they're in a different dimension, and just kind of like predator thing. So you just sort of see this slight distortion in the light. And so these things were around, and then they turned up later on as well. I was asleep, and they were just in my room looking at me and doing odd stuff. I think they wanted to know what I wanted them for, because I summoned them up. Because this guy's incantation. I can have to practice that, incantation. And so he basically summoned them up using his spell. So it's a bit like the Living Dead. What's they call it? Book of the Dead. Yeah. So you had the thing with the Evil Dead. That's right, Evil Dead. So you had the tapes. The bloke put the tape. This guy fast forward. Didn't know what he was listening to. He put it on, and that became this kind of chaos magic, and then he was summoning up things using words that people don't use. And that's the other thing with language. If you sort of key into things, other areas, so you're working outside of the, like I said, this buffer zone. So where there's common information and language, you'll be sort of trapped in a bit of a loop. It's like going to a library and pulling out bits of information. But if you're looking for something new, you've got to look into other areas that haven't been tapped into with the consciousness, and then this kind of web of consciousness travels further afield then. So you're expanding that buffer zone a little, and you're also creating another area where you go, places you go in your mind. And there's 2 ways to do it. I guess there is different ways to do it. You either see yourself travelling in there, but by going there, you're going inside yourself. The idea is when people astral travel, they think possibly their soul leaves their body, but actually it probably goes inside and through doorway, and then it goes out. So it's like you go into hyperspace. It's it would still exist. Here we go. There's some stuff, getting some information onto hyperspace. So you leave an image. An image would be left behind while you travel, and then you'd be traveling, I guess, outside of time. So when you go and travel and do things, you possibly could have been there months, and when you come back into your body, you might have been just minutes, because it's just that way of outside of this dimension to another dimension. And how information scatters itself through the universe. So if I send my mind to several different places, I could go to all the places at the same time, but I have existed at different moments, that information, because I've actually split myself over different places. I guess the only way to explain that is if people, say I was on stage and I was doing some sort of performance or doing something, everybody in that audience would have a different memory of me, but in essence I was only in one place at one time. But for them, I exist as information in their mind in different forms, and they will remember different sides of it. Maybe they might find me funny, or maybe they might be more serious about it, based on their kind of filter of perceptions. So it's the kaleidoscope of reality, really. So to exist in more than one place at one time, and that's kind of magical in itself. Project your consciousness over a long distance, but all that journey between them points, you were there, you might not recall it necessarily. So, let's see what I've covered. To cover channeling, I've covered some magic. So I'll probably look at this side of magic, consciousness, light, symbolism, and try to get a bit more deeper into that. I've realised that, what do they call it? I'm trying to think of the name for the field, but it's basic. Goes like the shape like that, and toroidal fields, and they're actually going into like a quantum gateway. So, and there's other stuff to do with the what was on the emerald tablets, and it was. They say as above, as below, but people miss out as outside, as inside. That's basically the terminology. So what's within you, the inner universe, is a reflection of the outer universe. So it's a parallel. It doesn't have to be working sort of like looking at the stars and figuring out how that affects your nerve. It's like using the mirror. That's a reflection of yourself. So it's sort of separating the hologram, really, and deeper look at that. So most of the journeys you want to take are inside yourself, and then to expand your awareness outside is really what you feel with your body. So you can sense energy and auras and things, and your third eye as well. So people try to see things around them. So there are beings that you can't see with your eyes at all. It's like the fairy type entities. You might sense something, like say something, you've sat down and something falls over or moves around, or you felt like something just jumped on you and jumped off you, or something like that. You have a feeling that something's in the room, and then you see it with your third eye, so you can't see it with your physical eyes. And then you might see, it's a bit like that movie, there's a movie that they have this eyeglass, and they use the eyeglass, and when they use that they can see it with their physical eyes. But you're doing that with your third eye, so you want to be able to see what's there, and you might see something that might scare you. You might see something quite innocent. They're quite innocent, like children faces, fairy folk, and they know when you see them, because your consciousness registers it, and they can read your consciousness at some level. And there's other things, and they're a bit more grumpy, like goblin type things. So these entities exist. It's people just can't see them. They're in their dimension. It's a lot more brighter. I was sort of looking with my third eye. It was like it was all summery and it's all more magical. So it's brighter. It's like a different frequency. So they're bound to be in a higher dimension. I guess that's really it. You'd think higher dimension they'd be more denser. They just don't. But it's probably not true. It's basically as you go up dimensions, it becomes hotter, doesn't it, and more energetic. So it's beyond my vision, my sort of spectrum. of sight, and these beings seem to just be able to walk through doors and stuff. So we could all say it's just imaginary, but there seems to be very strange how it takes no effort to see them. You know, I don't have to think, what do they look like? What appearance will they take and stuff like that. I mean, they're pretty much straight away, and there's sort of mixtures between small children and plants and things like that, and elements. So they're a kind of elemental creatures, and they're unusual. Usually they're quite small. Especially if you pick up something in your property, you might see a distortion of some kind, and that might be like a shadow at the corner of your eye. I've had it where I'm asleep. My eyes are closed, and the light is just like the moonlight. There's nothing else blocking out the sun, or blocking out the moon, I should say. But I've had it where you can see the dark shadow go across your face. Or recently, orbs have started turning up. So lighter beings. This could be because the sun's more active. There's entities that actually reside within the sun, and maybe they reside in a kind of like another Earth. You know, like Earth. Some will map the Earth as different shells of dimensions. So it's like an onion. So there's different layers, and I guess this is more true when people see the floating cities and things like that. They've just pierced into that veil, and the reason they see them floating is because they're actually on the land above them. It's like being underwater, and you know, for a fish to see the surface we see the water, but maybe the fish doesn't apprehend the water as being anything more than air to it. You know. It's just where it lives. So it's all very different in different dimensions. So basically the mind doesn't take any time whatsoever to create something in the creative part of the brain, and that's because that's more the spiritual consciousness. Involved, and going back to orbs, so there's more these light beings that seem to be coming back, and at night my eyes are closed and I might have a flash in the eye, one of my eyes, so I sense these are probably these orb type entities that are they're connected. Maybe they're going back through me, maybe I'm the gateway. So remember I mentioned about this toroidal field has a doorway, and we are like the mirrors, and it's only when it's reflected in our consciousness that they actually register them. So things could come through people all the time. Like people wonder why poltergeists turn up, and it's often seen that maybe when there's a teenager who's got a lot of energy, a lot of psionic energy, that she's feeding the creature so it can do stuff, when actually she might be summoning it up, and she's the doorway. So when that doorway is adjusted, she blocks it out, the filter's on it stops that entity coming through her, and that entity's probably an attachment of her own psyche, so when she's enraged she becomes that entity. So and also inward things, people internalise anger. So men might externalise anger. So it's a destructive wave coming outwards, while some female elements, not that all females do this, but they tend to refocus it back on themselves, and that, and which can create its own loop really, because the more angry you are at yourself, you're angry at the world. It creates this paradox, and possibly this is the doorway for this entity to exist. It's got loads of angry energy, and it can manifest its consciousness, and its consciousness is a segment of the person's as well. It's the pilot for it to operate. So there's poltergeists that exist, there's poltergeists that probably don't. They're just manifestations of the human, because we are our own gods in our own reality, and maybe we don't see that as how advanced we really are. You know, if you look at your DNA and how you can eat things and how it structures your body and stuff like that, it's quite amazing really, and how complex you are I mean, you've got billions of cells, if not trillions, and they're all operating together and they're all working together. But you can't, at some level, there's certain levels you haven't been able to reach. You know, like when people have certain illnesses start taking hold. Well, the fact you've got to be immortal is also a bit complex. I'm going to go around this guy. That's it. So yeah, definitely is more to reality. So the idea of we think about as gods is that they have they live in a different dimension, and they can do anything they like, and they don't have any fallibilities or anything. When actually, for each level you're in, each dimension, you're kind of mortal to that plane of existence. So drawing upon other things, like the idea of the say Marvel character Thor, and because he comes from a different dimension, it gives him extra strength and extra other things. But within his own dimension, he'll be mortal because everything operates at his frequency. Everything has a balance and an order to it. I mean, there's chaos, but it's constantly controlled by consciousness to make some form of order. And there's only chaos when there's other consciousnesses present that are opposing the main one, which is no different than how people see Satan or Hatan, something it's called as well, is the imposer of man. So it could be the body itself is its own prison. So it's that dark side of understand what that really means. People have tried to create an entity based on their fantasies, what the devil is, and haven't really explored what that really means, and that in some ways they're part devil, and they share this sort of spiritualness with whatever they create around them, and also your fellow kin, you're sharing, you're a part of them, you know, spiritually you're connected to them at some level. So anyway, I hope this esoteric chat has some value to somebody, and it's quite interesting how, you know, when you think things work separately, they're actually all connected at some level. So this is Pixie sign off. Have a good one.